All right, YouTube, our friends at the Anti-Defamation League, that highly patriotic and ever-loved order of Zionist individuals, has called on Donald Trump to drop the slogan America First. Trump also said that he's not going to dance to the false song of globalism anymore. Essentially, America First, in what we would consider a proper modern sense, means we're tired of going over to the third world and seeing American bodies lying around in some retarded desert somewhere. We're really tired of being infiltrated by foreign governments, which they use central planning in almost a nationalistic sense to buy up land and properties and so forth in the United States, try to influence things here. We see, in many ways, the international community really trying to apply foreign law to the United States, trying to censor things. You would see Turkey. Turkey has perhaps been on the forefront of this lately, especially with Twitter, to a lesser degree with Facebook and sometimes YouTube, knocking websites offline in their country when they don't get their way, trying to keep criticism of their government from being online, taking down satirical videos of Tayyip Erdogan or whatever the fuck his name is. We've seen this time and time again. I think the Pakistanis have done that before. The Saudi Arabians certainly. They all want their slice of the censorship pie because they want to enforce their agenda upon the world and make themselves seem blameless. China has an intranet for this reason. China has chosen a more isolationist tactic. Many of these other governments, they realize the necessity of being online, but they still want to have their cake and eat it too. They want the free and open web without it being free and open. And that's just the internet. That doesn't even speak volumes about trade. That even doesn't even talk about foreign conflict and things like that. Essentially, what the Anti-Defamation League appears to be saying is that they don't consider themselves Americans first. They consider themselves first and foremost Zionists. And they feel uncomfortable with the concept that the United States would keep to itself, not constantly shed its blood overseas, not constantly, we bully around these little third world nations while refusing to even work with, developed nations. You would look at Obama's actions towards the Egyptians, really, after the Muslim Brotherhood failed there so spectacularly, sort of turning a blind eye to the government, and really, whining and sulking around because a bunch of Islamo-fascists weren't in charge of the country. Globalism is retarded. Now, I like to think of a world in which every person can live in peace. I'm not even talking necessarily about a nationalist world. I'm a libertarian. I see that as a version of American nationalism. If I go visit India, I want to eat Indian food. I want to see Indian architecture. I don't want to see a bunch of fucking McDonald's everywhere. It just doesn't interest me. I'm going to avoid places like that. I'm going to avoid the tourist hellholes like a plague. I'm going to go wandering through some alley in Bangalore or something and get like the real food, the real culture that's there. The same if I go anywhere in the world. If I go to Paris, I don't want to see a bunch of American fucking stores. I want to see French stores. I want to eat French cuisine. If I go to Ireland, I want to go to an actual Irish pub. I don't want to drink Budweiser all day. Stuff like that. That's not the kind of world that I want to live in. People's cultures all should be protected. If I go to Africa, I don't want to go eat at African McDonald's. I'll be eating actual African food when I'm there, because I have an appreciation for all of these different cultures. I would argue that the globalists and the multiculturalists that want to homogenize the entire fucking world are the ones that are, in a way, the most bigoted when you really think about it. Now, I know the alt-right has labeled that concept, oh, well, that means you're a conservative. First, I'm not a conservative. Never called myself a conservative. Secondly, if you're a properly understood nationalist in any sense, whether it's sort of American libertarianism or whether it's, nation state built ethnic nationalism in a European or an Asian sense or something, surely you have to understand, you have to apply that rational ethos to other cultures as well. Yes, you can argue no immigration, everyone has to remain separate, but at the same time, if you go to some foreign state, if you go to Japan, do you want to see Japanese culture, or are you going to eat at Burger King all day? The Anti-Defamation League wants more Americans to die in the Middle East for Israeli interests. They always have. They consider it a severe form of anti-Semitism if you challenge this fact, to the point where the very idea of Americans putting their own country first is to them a form of anti-Semitism. They're trying to draw a parallel between the sense of we're tired of war, we're tired of being screwed in trade, we're tired of losing our manufacturing. They're trying to conflate that with Americans that didn't want to enter World War II. They're entirely different things, first. And secondly, how is it anti-Semitic to even suggest that we shouldn't have been part of the Second World War? We look back at that history. We look back at the fact that we joined World War II, and we build all this propaganda around how great we were, even though we waited years to enter the war after hundreds of thousands of people had already fucking died. We build all this propaganda up about how we were blameless and did no wrong, even though we were firebombing civilians. We dropped the A-bomb on Japan and did all of these other questionable things that people still debate about whether it was necessary or proper even to this day. We hold ourselves blameless. We hold ourselves up because we were the victors, and we got to write the history books as being the saviors of Western civilization. And if we had done anything else, we would have been horrible Nazi bigots. Well, plenty of other countries were not involved in the fighting. We don't look at them and say, well, the fact that the Brazilians didn't send their one fucking cruiser over to bomb the Nazi shores means they're all a bunch of horrible racist Nazi bigots. Obviously, they wanted Jews to die. You know, the Soviet Union was throwing tens of millions of people in gulags. We didn't invade them. We say, oh, well, Cold War rationale. We realized we couldn't have done anything. We couldn't have saved these Ukrainians and Belarusians and people from the Baltics and all of these other states, even though Patton said as soon as World War II ended, hey, we should go invade the Soviet Union. It sounds like a good idea because these commies are getting out of hand, and we could have avoided the whole Cold War if we had. And we would have seen even millions of more people dying on foreign soil. He observed, of course, oh, well, their manpower's all played out. They've been bombed to shit. They can't fight back. You know, we're still fresh faces in this war for the most part. We got plenty of manpower and industry left. No, the ADL doesn't know what the fuck it's talking about. The people of a nation have the right to put their own nation first. Clearly. What other fucking purpose is there to having a nation if you're not willing to defend it and hold to its traditions and values? Now, when we talk about traditions, my understanding is Revolutionary era traditions. The right to be left alone. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you're transgendered. I don't care what religion you follow. None of that really matters to me. It's really about national identity, and subjugated to that, the very concept, the core of that national identity, which is liberty, which is freedom to do what you want to do. All the regulations are bullshit. These trade deals are bullshit. The concept of a centrally powerful federal government is anathema to the very founding goals of the United States. The ADL doesn't want to understand this. The ADL wants us to continue participating in the bad old days, which have been going on since the end of World War II, whereby the United States, which formerly had largely kept to itself, and when it had attempted to attack another country, was trying to liberate people in many cases because it saw some level of tyranny it couldn't, it just couldn't deal with it, or it had been attacked already, the Spanish-American War or something. Other than our land grabs with Mexico, that was, a different story altogether. Manifest destiny, as you would term it, and it's sort of the romanticist Americana of the era. You look back, and after World War II, what do we begin doing? We keep spending hundreds of thousands of U.S. lives in these proxy conflicts. We're in Korea, we're in Vietnam, we're in Iraq, we're in all of these other places. And really, people have gotten tired of it. The ADL doesn't understand the paradigm shift that I've spoken of within U.S. politics is itself a microcosm of a much greater paradigm shift worldwide by the Western world, largely against the current world order, which isn't working. When did we determine as Americans? When did the Europeans determine as Europeans? When did the Asians determine as Asians and everyone else on Earth? When did we determine that we had to remain the same forever and stagnation was okay and it was all right to be just a little bit prosperous, and we really didn't need to make any greater goals? We don't need to fly to Mars. That's kind of, that's kind of stupid. Let's not waste our time doing that. We don't need to build any great monuments anymore. Our roads are good enough as is. We don't really need to improve them. Our medical infrastructure's okay. We don't need to really tweak it any. Everything, taxes are okay. We don't need to lower them. We've got a little bit of free speech left. That's all right with us. We don't need more free speech because that's too scary and we might have terrorists around. When did we decide that we wanted stagnation and the status quo, when stagnation and the status quo is crippling the entire world? It's not just crippling the United States. It's crippling everybody. Look at what happens in China right now. Their system is not working. The people of China are heavily suppressed, but quite clearly people there are losing their pensions in the meat grinder of propping up their own growth. Their central government is completely clueless about the building of infrastructure, about the movement of world markets. They're hemorrhaging money. Most of their foreign plans are failing, and they're aiming for a deep long recession at the moment. They're having fucking problems. When people talk about Chinese strength, that's bullshit too. The ADL is a fixture of the past order. And the past order is we must globalize and homogenize and intermix, and we must have open borders, and we must fight all these little proxy wars so we don't get some greater struggle down the road. But that's what we're aiming for. All these little proxy conflicts are building up tension around the world, and they will lead to a third world war. It will explode in our faces. The current established world order, which is globalist, which is multicultural, but I mean, just because it's globalist and multicultural and what we would consider liberal, generally in the American sense, doesn't mean that they're liberals in the sense that they cast themselves as anti-war. They're obviously not. We've got a Nobel Peace Prize winning president who bombs civilians every fucking day. They're not anti-war. They're pro-war, actually. They're almost jingoistic. They really love throwing manpower around. They just kind of disagree on how to apply it and what the end goal should be. That's really the only difference. We've got a world order in which a person is considered a bigot if they have any appreciation for their own culture at all, in which a person is considered a bigot if they have an appreciation for their ancestors. Everybody in the world right now is lied to by these idiots and told you shouldn't have any pride in your ancestors because your ancestors were either uncouth savages, or they were evil despotic colonials, or they were Nazis, or something else, some reason why your grandparents' generation was kind of, in many cases, the first generation that was even tolerable. Your parents, yeah, that's better, and your generation is just fine, but everything that came back before that, going back thousands of years, they were all just horrible, despicable, evil savages all the way fucking down. The human race, if these people were correct, the human race wouldn't even exist. And to hear the ADL throw around the term anti-Semitism for everybody that doesn't toe the line on whatever they happen to believe in at any given time, you'd think Hitler won the Second World War. You'd think Nazi Germany engulfed the entire world to hear them talk about how many people they consider to be anti-Semitic or to be Nazis and skinheads and evil, horrible, racist bigots. If you listened to groups like the ADL, you would think Adolf Hitler won the Second World War, currently controls most of the world's surface, and that there are Nazi UFOs flying around Antarctica every day. You'd think that, because that's the way that their reasoning works, and I would call it unreasonable. I wouldn't even call it a form of reason. It's retarded. How is a slogan, America First, two fucking words, which simply mean, yeah, we're concerned about the future of our country because things aren't going so well right now. How is this a term of anti-Semitism? Well, if you had a party in Ghana saying Ghana First, would the ADL go after them and say, oh, this reminds us of the Second World War and people who didn't want to attack those horrible Nazis? You should drop this slogan because nobody should put their nation first. In a lot of nations around the world, they have enough ethnic pride and national pride and whatever else kind of pride in their culture or their identity in some permutation, so that wouldn't fly. They'd just ignore them. They'd say, what the fuck is this bullshit about? But because this is in the Western world, there are people who will actually take this tripe seriously. And that's what it is. It's nonsense. It's rubbish. It's trash. It deserves to be thrown in the dustbin of history. Now, I say this not as even a Trump fan. I'm a libertarian, which is the American version of nationalism. It's holding to our revolutionary, our founding national values, our identity. That's our identity. Our identity was built upon the concept of liberty, of people doing what they wanted to do, working how they wanted to work, enjoying the fruits of their labor. And I'll tell you this, the same globalism that destroys a third world culture by filling it with a bunch of crap like McDonald's and Burger King, and that destroys a European ethnically based state by pouring in a bunch of immigrants which don't ever assimilate into their culture because there was never any assimilation in Europe to begin with. The Europeans are bitterly locked into their ethnic mindset, always have been and likely always will be. That same globalism destroys the United States by denigrating our value of liberty and making a bigger and bigger and bigger international authority and national level federal government that takes more and more abusive steps to curtail our liberty. That's what it does. Globalism hurts literally every human being on this planet. It hurts Jews. It hurts black Africans. It hurts the whitest of fucking Scandinavians. It hurts every American. It hurts the Mexicans. It hurts Canadians. It hurts Latin people in fucking Brazil and Argentina. It hurts people in New Zealand. It hurts people in Malta. It hurts every single fucking person on this planet. It's a cancer. And everyone should understand. Literally, there's not a single political group I can think of that benefits from this. Nationalists, why would they benefit from globalism? It destroys the nation. Libertarians, it destroys liberty. Conservative, so-called traditional conservatives, where are your traditions now? You don't have any. You probably look with scorn upon most of your ancestors. You've been cucked so deeply that you look back at people who thought they were doing the right thing, fought bravely for whatever the hell they happen to believe in, and you scorn them. You scorn your own blood, your own heritage. You don't even have to be a European. If you're an African, you probably scorn them at this point because of globalism. A communist? Hell, if you're a communist, globalism's not going to achieve communism. It's run in part by a bunch of corporations, multinational bodies that appear to exhibit no response whatsoever to any nation's laws at this point. They don't even really respond to international authorities. They just sort of do whatever the hell they want and get richer and richer off the backs of what you would term the proletariat. Liberals, classical liberals, neoliberals, progressive liberals, it doesn't matter. These progressives are suffering too. The progressives of the West keep seeing a bunch of religious zealots entering their country and fighting against the very values that they stand for. Name a single person in this world who isn't themselves like some global elite, like a high-level politician or a CEO or a major banker or something, that actually derives any benefit whatsoever from globalism. It's essentially a worldwide movement of slave labor. That's all it is. Keep the people in line, take more of their liberty. Even in the most despotic regimes, they take more liberty in the name of globalism. It's retarded. The ADL is retarded. What they're saying here is the purest form of retardation I think I've ever heard in my living days. The ADL, apparently, a group that supposedly has we're American Jews and so forth. Apparently, they don't even consider themselves Americans first. Do they not understand that Jews living in the United States would derive a benefit from us keeping to ourselves, not sending a bunch of people over to die in some desert somewhere because some other country happens to ask us to do so? Or that that Jews here would have higher employment rates? Because we'd have more manufacturing jobs? I'd think that'd be pretty good. More breweries and lumber mills and steel mills and even coal mines. I don't really give a fuck. You can argue about the environmental impacts of some of this manufacturing. I think we can work through it somehow. We have in the past. I think we can in the future. Globalism is just fucking stupid for the entire fucking world. Globalism affects everybody negatively, so it shouldn't even matter What your political ideology is, what your race is, what your religion is, that's kind of secondary, because no matter what it is, it will be erased by globalism. Globalism simply seeks to elevate mankind to the level where we're all basically slaves, and it doesn't really matter what culture, what language you speak, what God you serve, because your God's not going to save you from the globalists. Your language means absolutely nothing to the globalists. They don't care what language you do commerce in, so long as you're paying them their 99% of the productivity. That's the world we live in. It's stagnant, it's stupid, it's not working, growth is slowing down worldwide for a reason. It's obvious the way things are operating now does not work. Every nation should protect its own borders, protect its own economy, and protect its own culture. Let's all compete together. Let's have world trade. I don't have any problem with that. But let's be sensible about this and actually have some sort of human identity. The biggest lie of all of the globalists is that national identity bad, and so we just need to have human identity. But these same globalists see 99.9% of the human race as utterly expendable, as evidenced by the way they wage war constantly, the way they grind people down economically, the way that they foster a divisiveness on ethnic and religious basis every single day, the way they tell you that it's evil to even have a care for your ancestors. Like 3 generations ago, every American was just an evil Native American hating bigot or something. That's what they try to foster in you. They'll lie to you and say there's no such thing as race, but you're all evil racists at the same time. Well, nations shouldn't exist. Well, nations are racist and evil too. Okay, well, if you want to erase national identity, what you're really suggesting is that we all just sort of be homogenized slaves, in which they don't care what race you are. They really don't care. They just want your money. And the ADL is part of this world order. It's retarded. It's not working for the human race. It's bringing us closer to a third world war or something like that. Now, some of us would argue it's okay if we have an atomic war. That's, human beings will inevitably, we will survive in some form. We'll eventually claw our way back. And maybe if we burn out the corruption with radiation for long enough, the human race will actually rise up again and be stronger and better off for it. But I think it would suck for 99% of humanity because, unfortunately, they would wither and die. Half of them would be vaporized. Most of the rest would die of radiation poisoning, mass systemic metastasizing cancerous tumors, and so forth. And the ADL is not helpful when it comes to trying to guide a nation's policies, because it's fairly clear where their loyalties lie. It's not with the United States. It's not with any other country they happen to be operating in. It's really with their own form of globalism, which is to their benefit. And this is all propaganda. This is Nazi stuff. That's propaganda, folks. It's the clearest form. It's as clear as day. You can see it. It's clearly a form of propaganda. I would like to think most people will recognize it for what it is. That's about all. Peace out.